Hello and welcome to the Fall and Fallow podcast. Thank you everyone for being here. This is a podcast about plants where the discussion is centered around raising plant awareness and combating plant blindness. Together with my good friend Pisum Sativum, we are teaming up to bring you this three-part series charting our destiny through the eyes of plants. The relationship between plants and people stretch back millions of years. And of course, what we do has an effect on plants. What this podcast hopes to show is, from a plant's point of view, what is the outcomes when plants and people intersect and their worlds collide. So please join me and my friends as we discuss this topic. Thank you. Let's meet our guests.
Hi, I'm Ray.
Hi, I'm Hilma.
Hi, I'm Jolene.
Hi, I'm Ryan.
I'm your host, Ro. Also joining me in the studio today is JJ. She's recorded a few episodes with us in the past. Could you please say hi, JJ?
I am JJ.
JJ had a stroke a few years ago and her speech became impaired as a result. She's doing much better now, and we're thankful to have her with us. And today she's here with us in the studio providing emotional support as well as contributing in whatever way she can. The other guest that I want to introduce is Benny. He's running late. He will be here shortly and will be joining us in this conversation. Today's guests are from different generations and they bring that experience with them. Together we have a combined 280 years of knowledge and experience gathered here in this room. Each guest is from a different generation and they will give their perspective on the people plant relationship but pertaining to their generation. Pisum Sativum will give the plant's point of view on what the people plant relationship looked like over the generations and where we're at today.
Hi, I am Pisum Sativum, a garden pea. I am joining with Ro to chronicle the history of the people-plant connection. We will examine how plants view this intangible bond and what is the reality for plants. Throughout the podcast, we look back through the generations as mankind makes deliberate choices to create the world that he wants to live in as an individual, a nation, and globally. We will conclude by examining the effects on both man and plants resulting from those choices, and we look at the scenarios for the future.
Before we do, I'm speaking on behalf of everyone. We're here for the podcast, but mostly we wanted to meet Pisum Sativum. He's a celebrity. Mr. P, we love your YouTube channel. It is awesome.
You are so kind.
And let's just take a moment to celebrate and enjoy having a celebrity among us.
I'm all for enjoying the moment. There are no cameras and no flashing lights. I will take it.
All right now, it's Saturday night, we're all chilling. Does anyone plan to get their groove on later?
What is that?
That's slang for partying.
In what year?
In the 70s, on Saturday nights, we would just boogie down and chillax and jive talk with our homies. That's how we had fun.
Speak English, please.
Hilma, you grew up in the 60s and 70s. Does any of that slang sound familiar?
When we were growing up, cool running, things going good. Yeah, man. Agree. What's up, man? What a going, man?
Groovy. Race slang words are part of your generation too. What are some of the slang words that you used growing up?
Slang words. Yo, yo. Word up. Dope.
Dope means you approve of something, doesn't it? Groovy means the same thing. And that's proof that slang crosses boundaries and reinvents itself. Hilma, do you remember when Afro was the signature hairstyle in the 60s and 70s?
Yeah.
What else do you remember from back in the day?
Tube tops, bellfoot pants, crinoline.
What was the crinoline like?
Crinoline was like a dress that puff off like.
The bell bottoms and the platforms lasted a long time. They went from the 60s into the 70s and into the 80s. I remember when they wore platforms at raves.
They still wear platforms at raves.
What do you do for fun?
Picnic, bus trips, dance hall.
We will take a break, and when we return, we will continue our 70s look back. Welcome back, folks, to the Fall and Fallow Heart Pod. Hilma, is there anything that you miss about the 60s or the 70s?
The children used to play outside. People used to have a face to face conversation. Now the kids text each other and call that talking, or they are either playing video games or watching TV.
Pisum, is there anything that you miss about the 60s or the 70s?
Hilma, I enjoyed your recollections about the 70s, and I find it interesting that the human connection is what you miss the most. We plants share a similar fate. In the past, there was a closer people plant connection. Planting and harvesting were more hands on and more labor intensive. Now, these tasks are mechanized. Granted, it is more efficient, but how do you connect with a machine? It is the price of progress. When the machines came along, it was a huge technological advance, but unfortunately, it did not do much to advance the people plant connection.
Pisum, I see the similarity now that you pointed out. I'm going to throw this question out to Benny too. Benny is here, and I'm so glad that you were able to make it, Benny, and to join us for this discussion. You're a baby boomer too. What did the 60s and the 70s mean to you?
I hate to put a damper in things, but I am going to do it anyway. There are a lot of riots during the 60s and 70s, leading to property destruction, boarded up storefronts, abandoned properties, and people fleeing towns and cities because of the arrests.
It was a dark time because of the social upheaval, but I also recall that plants and people worked together to revitalize devastated neighborhoods and help them recover. Community gardens were organized to address specific social issues, and social justice gardens were established to beautify the neighborhoods that became disenfranchised and neglected due to the riots. Urban revitalization gardens were credited with being a positive influence on how a neighborhood was viewed by its residents, visitors, and politicians.
I thought a garden was a garden. I have a garden in my backyard. Is that a social justice garden?
What a great question, Rian. After the podcast, we can talk some more about what it meant to be a social justice garden, and we will see if your garden fits the bill. Cool?
Cool.
Now let's vibe with Ray, who is the millennial representative among us. Ray, let's talk about the years between the 80s and the 90s, the millennial generation. The millennials are considered a tech savvy generation, but they had their own unique sense of style also. That was the MC Hammer era, Hammer time.
Let's not forget about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, G.I. Joes. I still have my figures. My times growing up. Fun times before technology. All we had was a good old boombox. Maybe a Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo. To be out in the fire escape just listening to music, outside, outdoors, playing handball.
And who remembers the Cabbage Patch dolls? You remember that plastic had a special smell? I still remember that smell to this day. The Cabbage Patch dolls were one of the must have toys of the 90s.
Cabbage also became a household word. That was a proud moment for the Brassica family, and good for plants all round.
I've heard this, and maybe it's just urban legend, but is it true, Pisum, that the consumption of cabbage increased as a result of the popularity of the Cabbage Patch dolls?
No truth to that at all. Cabbage Patch dolls had no effect on the consumption of cabbage. No, the millennials are not famous for that, but that generation heralded a new, exciting approach to gardening.
How so?
They popularized small space gardening and made it fashionable. People were moving from the farms into towns and cities because that's where the high paying jobs were. They took their plants with them and grew them wherever they found room. They made growing herbs and ornamental plants into a real trend. They were plants on balconies, windowsills, hanging from ceilings, growing on rooftops, even in offices and airports. My friend, Pothos, teamed up with other climbing plants like himself, and together they are grown on some airport walls as part of a living wall. Pothos sent me a photograph of him on the living wall at Incheon Airport in South Korea.
Wow, that's a lovely photo.
He loves it there. By bringing the outdoors indoors, they help travelers to still experience nature and reduce stress from all the running around that is part of getting to their destination. Pothos and the other plants also filter the air and absorb sound.
Not to mention that the space looks better and hands down it's way more visually appealing than what was there before. Please send my regards to Podos and the other plants and just let them know that what they're doing to lighten the burden of the weary traveler is so very much appreciated.
I just googled Pothos on the airport wall. How does Pothos get water when he's on the wall?
There's a lot of intricate technology installed to provide pothos and the other plants with water and nutrients. But this is a great example of how we are part of your journey. As mankind advances technologically, plants evolve with them.
Pisum, thank you so much for the knowledge and experience that you bring to this forum. We will take a short break, and when we return, Joe, it will be your turn to tell us about your generation. Welcome back, folks, to the Fall and Fallow Heart Pod. Early on, we spoke with Hilma and Ray, and now we're going to speak with Jolene. Joe represents Gen Z, the generation born between 1996 and 2012. Jolene, let's chit chat about the generational differences. You just had a history lesson in pop culture from the 60s to early 70s. Tell me, what do you like the most about your generation? I'm sorry, I meant from the 60s to early 90s.
One thing I love about my generation is how we're able to get information on anybody and anything. No matter what it is, we can find it out.
That was certainly a game changer. Is there anything else that comes to mind when you think about your generation?
One thing that I think is going to be remembered for my generation is Vine. Even if you don't remember its name, it'll live on. Vine is an app that was there for maybe 2 or 3 years. People would take 6-second videos, and people would be hilarious and funny and like tell stories and stuff and sing. And that type of video is still living on now, but it's just a different time. It's gone now.
Is there anything that you wish you could change in this world? What would that be, and what is the change that you would make?
One thing I wish I could change in this world is I wish there was more community-centered architecture within our neighborhoods. Just because it would be nice to be able to meet with others and see what they're up to, no matter the age or whatever. Just kind of bring the community together.
Thank you, Joe, for taking the time to share what it means to be part of the Gen Z generation. We can't conclude this segment without taking a look at JJ's generation. JJ was born in 1929.
That was a long time ago.
Yes, it was. And her generation, which is known as the silent generation or the traditionalists, is the generation born between 1928 and 1945. Guess how much a gallon of gas cost back then?
Well, I would say maybe about 50 cents a gallon.
If I had to take a guess, I think the minimum wage was like $2.
The minimum wage then was 25 cents per hour. Compare that to the minimum wage today, which is $16.50 an hour.
Wow.
Wow, right? If we could only bring back those prices. What's also interesting about that time is that the Great Depression was going on and World War II was raging. Unemployment was high and there were lots of food shortages. So JJ grew up in a very tough time. This was the era of the Victory Gardens.
Victory gardens were not the same as social justice gardens because they had a different purpose. For many people, cultivating a victory garden was their way of supporting the war being fought overseas, since it freed up resources and this allowed more food to be shipped to the troops. Victory gardens also supplemented the food supply of those families remaining at home. Beets, carrots, squash, and kale were among the staples in victory gardens.
Okay.
Thank you, Pisum. What an interesting bit of history. It puts everything into context and shows how closely people and plants are connected. The story of the Victory Gardens really highlights the symbiotic relationship between people and plants. People and plants were both mobilized to serve at home during the war years, and plants took care of us and we took care of them. We'll take a little break, and when we return, we will talk to our final guest, Ryan, who belongs to Generation Alpha. Stay tuned, everyone. Welcome back, everyone, to the Fall and Fallow Heart Pod. This is a podcast about plants, and in this episode today, we're looking at the relationship between plants and people over the generations. So, our guests today are from different generations, and I'm currently talking to Ryan, who is from Generation Alpha. That generation was born between 2010 and 2024, early 2025. So that generation is the most tech savvy generation of us all because they were exposed to technology from birth. The smartphones, the social media, the iPad, and the AI all emerged within this time frame. Ryan, you were born into a technologically advanced age, but there's always room for more. There is always room for a new technology and for more inventions. Can you think of something that you would like to see invented? And can you describe what problem it would solve?
One time I was just laying down in bed and I thought, what if there was a shower head that was Bluetooth and connected to your phone, where you were not home, but you knew you were about to take a shower and you want to give the water some time to warm up and you want to put it at the exact temperature you wanted it at. So you could just go to your phone and set it, for instance, at 80 degrees. No one has ever made that to my knowledge at this point, but I always thought of making that because I think it was very convenient.
Interesting. Ray, the same question. What would you invent if you could?
An invention I would like to see. I'd say maybe some sort of AirPods that would translate to society when people interact and talk with different languages and cultures. I think it would be really interesting.
My initial response is force fields. Force field would be basically a barrier that can be put up to surround something. It was seen many times in sci-fi movies and different type of barriers, but I think a very simple example would be like a school shooting situation. So and my thoughts is that a force field will be put up not around all the individual students and also the perpetrator. It stays in place until the police come, you investigate everything, and you decide and identify who's the innocents and who's the perpetrators, and basically no one is harmed, no one can harm each other, and that's a probably very simple use case for just a force field in a school shooting situation. Another example for a force field is in the case of I have my crops. I'm on a spaceship or maybe I'm on a planet like Mars. I have my greenhouse set up, but if some breach happens, the force field could be instantly stood up and it would protect the plants. It would keep the atmosphere around the plants the same and not let that atmosphere vent out of space, and also having the temperature also drop to like maybe whatever space's temperature is, whether it's 0 degrees Kelvin or whatever temperature it is on Mars. So that'd be a way for it to protect the plant.
What about you, Joe?
One thing that I wish would be invented is a way to instantaneously transfer knowledge from one brain to another. I think it would be very helpful in speeding up, jobs, life in general. Just be awesome.
I would love to invent talking plant pots saying, please water me now. They would be activated when water levels are critically low for indoor plants. It's really sad when that happens to my soil mates.
Thank you, Pisum. Hilma had to leave, but she shared with me in a previous conversation that she works with Alzheimer's patients and she sees the powerlessness that families feel when a loved one begins to lose their memory. She sees how it affects families when someone who was once productive and a contributing member of society has suddenly become helpless because they're incapacitated and not able to perform at previous levels because they have this memory loss. So she would like to invent a drug to cure Alzheimer's because currently Alzheimer's is an incurable disease. Thank you, everyone. These are all great ideas, and it's what progress is built on. What is someone's idea today, it can become reality tomorrow because of the the rapid technological advances that we're making as a society. Please stay tuned, everyone, as we take our final break for this episode. Welcome back, everyone, to the Fall and Fallow Hotpot. In the last segment, we spoke a lot about inventions. And in this final segment, the question I would like to pose to everyone is, do we give up control the more technologically advanced that we become? And I'm speaking specifically about robots and AI, since this is the hot topic for this generation. I'm also curious as to whether my guests see plants being included in that technological future that seems to be the next thing for man as they progress.
On the topic of robots, I would really enjoy it if robots were able to integrate better into our homes and sort of automate any processes that we don't have to do specifically, like the dishes or the laundry, something like that, in plants.
Robots and AI, just don't think we're ready for it yet. I think, particularly with robots, just that type of technology would be pretty scary. But amongst artificial intelligence, I feel like that could be of good use, possibly maybe helping find cures of diseases, maybe helping us get richer, or even in support of climate change and find out just better solutions to actually allow us to help us improve our world.
AI is taking over the world right now, and I do photography, and I've even found it helpful with photography. For instance, if it's too dark, I could tell AI to line this picture up and make it look sharper without me doing anything. It's really made my life easier when it comes to photography because things I would have to do manually, I don't have to do. And it's really crazy because back then, people had to do all this manually, and I see how hard it is, but AI, one touch of a button, give it a couple seconds, and it's good.
Okay, in response to your question, I would say that for AI and robots, my thoughts is the concept of morality, initially at least. What I see now is we're in the infancy of AI, and to me, it's similar to like having a child. Thought being is that, while a child is small and while a child's young and start growing up, we basically try to imprint the child with our set of moralities, our rules, our values as a parent, our values as a culture, our values as a society, so that when the child actually is of age and grows, and now the child is basically as big as the parent, or maybe taller, you still see a child going forth into the world that shares and can contribute to society in a positive fashion. So similar to that, I remember there was a lot of sci-fi shows that focused on these imprinting and having these core beliefs inside of computers. Granted, they weren't very elaborate, but at least there were some foundations and provided some protections. So another thought along these same lines is, as we consider going to distant planets, for example, going to Mars, I could see an example. Well, maybe we go to Mars in, I'm just picking two different decades, in 2050. But in 2040, I want to be able to send over AI-controlled robots and the goal of those robots is to establish an environment. They would be bringing plants with them. They would be cultivating those plants, looking after those plants, and we would go from a situation where we probably ship like a very small number of seeds or a very small number of seedlings over to Mars, but then it would be the AI and the computer. The robot's job is to cultivate and grow that crop so that now by 2050, when the humans actually start arriving, you have an environment that's a full crop of plants that are growing that are there to sustain not just the food requirements of humans, but also the atmospheric requirements of having enough oxygen to survive. So basically, those AI robots and the plants they will come before humans and will help to terraform the planet into something that would be livable for human beings in the future. And to round everything up, what I see is the symbiotic connection between humans and plants. So on Earth, even though in our big cities and we kind of remove a lot of the dense forests that actually generate oxygen, but we need these plants and flora in general. Thought being is that, it's symbiotic. the plants produce oxygen. Humans take in oxygen and give off carbon dioxide. The plants take that carbon dioxide and then turn around and generate oxygen again. So it's a very cyclical. So in what I describe as far as having the plants precede and the robots precede humans going to distant planets and then establishing an ecosystem, I see that. So it's like we're not leaving the plants behind. There's the potential that we'd be taking the plants with us to sustain us.
Benny, that was a profound statement. You get it. Plants will be there for the next chapter of man's journey. Ro, I am so glad that you invited me to be a part of this panel discussion. I felt that it captured the true essence of man as innovators and explorers at their core. What became apparent to me is that as man continues to push the boundaries of space exploration because of what technology makes possible, it goes without saying that in order to colonize a new world or worlds that are further and further away from Earth, plants will be essential for food, medicine, in recycling air, and in terraforming the planet. The look back over the generations reminds me of how far plants and man have come together, and looking forward, it is evident that plants are still part of man's future journey.
Thank you, Pisum. I hope that we accomplished what we set out to do, which was to identify the connection between plants and people and to trace it back as far as we could. We were able to trace it back to 1929 when the Great Depression started. We covered the war years, the baby boomers, the millennials. We covered Gen Z and Generation Alpha also. And what emerged from the discussion is how much plants and people need each other to survive and how far back in time the interdependence stretches. We have seen that the relationship reciprocally evolved, shifted, and adapted to the technological advances made. And we arrived at the conclusion that progress is inevitable, but it comes at a price. Now, we see this when we look at the close connection that was nurtured and fostered in earlier times. And that close connection succeeded in strengthening our bond because it was a more labor intensive society. And that harmony with plants was not built by accident, but it gradually eroded as society became more technologically advanced, starting with the Industrial Revolution to the emergence of AI. However, what is clear to me is that the future of man and plants continue to be intertwined because plants are needed to help man colonize a planet. They provide food, clothing, medicine, they're stress relievers, they're ornamental, they brighten any space. Plants are so multifunctional. The contribution that they make to man's health and well being is invaluable. It's also intangible, it cannot be quantified, but neither can it be ignored. To my wonderful guests, I loved being a part of this spirited conversation and getting a glimpse into the future that you envisage. To all my listeners, thank you for tuning in today, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you so much. Bye bye.